Hey everyone, Captain Chris from the Speckled Truth. I want to talk about two things. We just did a Facebook Live on it, but I want to rehash it. And that's talking about body profiles as well as fishing below the surface and using different types of lures and techniques to focus and target that part of the column. So, as I alluded to earlier in the podcast, we talked a little bit about body profile. And so, fall turned to winter, and then what I then did is go from fishing a Corky Fat Boy, so using baits like Corky Fat Boys with really good efficiency, and then started using more lip style jerk baits. And I want to talk about just a simple concept regarding body profile. And so Corky Fat Boy has as you can see, a pretty tall body profile, pretty wide body profile. And so again, in the fall, leading into early January, these baits were having tremendous efficiency, and so even on some days when it kind of would warm up a little bit more, but really what we found is that that bait was pretty short-lived, and so able to target those fish that were eating bigger profile baits. And so what I would then do is basically use a lip style jerk bait. But the thing I want to focus on is the actual bait profile, how tall it is in the midsection, and matching the profiles of the two baits. And so this is a Berkeley Juke 100 shallow, and this fish is about maybe 3.5 feet, pretty efficiently. But what this does is as you twitch this bait down, it ascends. Unlike the Corky Fat Boy, where as you're twitching it with your cadence, the bait's going to fall. And so what you're then doing is you're pretty much fishing the same part of the column. You're targeting the same fish that are still focusing on eating something with a little bit bigger profile. Instead, you're just giving them and giving the big trout a different profile and a different presentation. And so that can sometimes help you have a little bit more longevity in terms of a bite. So if you find that they're really not responding to a Fat Boy anymore, you can switch it back over to a Berkeley Juke, keeping the same profile, but you're still giving that bait more so in a scent, and those fish are going to target that just because it's a different presentation. Same situation though. So even on Berkeley Juke, what you'll find then is that even the bait or the fish will really kind of lean off of these and won't necessarily hit them with the amount of aggression they once were, and so they'll kind of taper off this particular bite. And so switching and again changing very techniques, keeping similar profiles in terms of the bait width, right? So these are pretty similar now, not as necessarily as big as each other, right? This is about a 1/2 inch shorter than the Berkeley Juke 100. And what this does, it fishes pretty similarly. So about 2 foot max, shadow wrap shad, twitching it down, and then that bait slowly rises. Slightly different, smaller profile, but still the same profile. And so what I'm still able to do is kind of keep that bite going because I'm giving them something that they're responding to, but now I'm just fishing different techniques in slightly different profiles. Same situation though. So what you find then is they're not really responding to baits that are sinking. They're not really responding to baits that are floating, right, and ascending into the column. And instead now what you want to do is actually fish something that has more of a suspension component to it. And this is the Rapala Shadow Wrap. And again, if you think about it, I'm fishing about 2 foot max, 2.5 foot max. So these baits fish really good in that efficiency because the density, because it's really, really salty water, this is actually a slow sink per se. But really what you'll even see is when you pause this bait, instead what it'll do is just slowly rise back to the top just because of the density of the water since it's so salty. And so now what I'm able to do is this bait's floating that much faster. This bait's kind of sitting in the column a little bit more. You're just presenting something with a similar profile, obviously not as tall or as wide, but you're still putting something that has that larger profile in a fish's vision, line of sight, and then pretty much what they're going to do is they've been attacking that. And so you have to pay attention to the fish and how they're responding to certain techniques. And so a Fat Boy, which you'll even find even with lip jerk baits, is as you're working that cadence, when those fish strike, they won't necessarily take it. So you'll actually feel them swipe at the bait. They won't necessarily take it. You won't hook them or anything like that, but you can feel those fish kind of come up to it and almost check on it and then peel off. And so what you're trying to do is really figure out what they want sitting in their face that's really going to target the strike. And so something that's maybe sitting in the column a little bit longer, upwards of 5-7 seconds sometimes. It's really painfully slow to fish these suspend style baits. But sometimes just a little rock in the bait due to wave action, moving a leader or maybe just a slight wobble or something like that just causes those fish to really, really go crazy. And so that's just paying attention to the subtle nuances that certain baits and certain presentations can give you when fished in certain estuaries. And so we talked about 4 of them that fish similarly, right? Some sink, some float, some suspend, but the same component there is that you have a larger profile bait that's sitting in a column that those fish, you're wanting them to eat and target, right? And so you're providing that to them in different ways. All right, so we've talked about fishing. We talked about fishing different lip style jerk baits in terms of body profiles. Let's talk about fishing the top part of the water column. So I'll call it below the surface, if you will. And we're really targeting about 8 inches to really the surface itself and fishing those with great efficiency. And so top waters are getting ready to really kind of come in a full swing. There are some people, I fish them year round. It depends on the water and the weather conditions. But really top waters are really getting ready to get in a full swing, especially as spring is starting to get here. Milder temps, warmer temps, that water temps coming up. And so those fish are coming up and feeding a little bit more aggressively, right? And so what happens though is spring doesn't necessarily present a lot of consistency. It changes, right? We still have these weather anomalies. You'll still have dips in temperature. You'll have dips in water temperature as well. And so you just don't have that true consistency across the board. And so what happens is when you're presenting a top water bait, what happens is those fish want to commit similar to that, like the lip style jerk baits, but they won't. And so how do you target that, right? And so fishing just below the surface. And 3 baits I really want to talk about and 2 are kind of new, I guess. And then 1 has been kind of the main staple across the inshore scene for a long time, and that's the MirrOlure 7M. So this is really the trendsetter, if you will. And we'll talk about the fishability of each of these baits here in just a second, but this is the MirrOlure 7M. This is the MirrOlure Double D, Texas Custom Lures MirrOlure Double D, and then this is the Balletto Lele. And so these 3 baits actually fish pretty similarly. Again, though, subtleties and different profiles, but they fish about the same. But they also have certain nuances and how they present it. And so the first is, we'll start with the trendsetter. So the MirrOlure 7M. I've talked about this before, but this can be something when you're actually working a top water bait, when you're walking the dog and those fish are really, they're hitting at it, but they're not really committing. But they definitely are responding to something that's a little bit more aggressive. And so the MirrOlure 7M on a 2 or 3 count cadence, so 1, 2, and that bait comes down, it floats pretty quick to the top of the surface. And so you're able to still fish a bait that's pretty aggressively. So this is really almost like an extension of a top water without being a true top water walk the dog side to side action. Instead, you're really twitch, 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 getting that bait down there, but it really doesn't come down. It's about 6-8 inches, and it actually rapidly ascends to the surface, and then you keep that cadence going. And what you'll find is those fish that weren't quite committing to a top water bait will commit to a 7M because of its aggression and how you fish it. Okay, for something that's we'll actually go with this one. So this is the Texas Custom Lures MirrOlure Double D, and so really this is the 27M series, 27MR series in terms of body profile. But instead of sinking, it floats. It ascends, right? Here's the thing, though, is this fish probably fishes the deeper of the 3. This fish is about maybe a foot max. And what happens is, as the ascent rate, this also has the slowest ascent rate of the 3. And so, again, 1, 2, 3, and then I give it a one solid pause, like 1 second pause, and then I'll give it one more twitch, and that bait is twitch, 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 and then you give it that one more twitch, and it kind of comes down, and then it slowly floats back to the top, sometimes upwards of 3 seconds. And that's really when you're getting a lot of those fish to hit. And so fishing it that slow, you could see that cooling trend, if you will, that water temp kind of coming down, or those fish, again, just really aren't committing. You could see them swirling it. You want to sit a bait really in front of a fish's face for the amount of time that you're trying to. The Mirror Lure, Texas Custom Lures, Double D is the way to go with a slightly larger profile, right? It has that slightly larger profile, 27 MR series. All right, the last is kind of bridging a gap, and this is the Balletto Lele. So this is a little bit smaller in terms of the actual bait profile and bait size. This is actually pretty similar to this is a 7 or an 18 MR is a heavy Dean, but it's a 17 Miradine regular size. As you can see, it's pretty similar in size, about 3 inches in length. And the thing about this is this fish is about maybe 6 to 10 inches below the surface, obviously to the surface, but as you twitch it down, about 6 inches, maybe about 10 inches max, and then it'll float back to the top of the column or to the top of the surface. And so this is great for a little bit more of a finesse presentation. Again, a slightly smaller profile. It also has it bridges the gap in terms of ascent rate. So this actually floats faster to the surface than a Texas Custom Lure Double D, but a lot slower than the 7M. So again, you're kind of bridging that gap. So maybe as those fish are swirling at the top and not necessarily truly committing to a top water presentation that you have, and they're really not connecting because they don't like the aggression in terms of fishing your 7M, a way to slightly slow it down a little bit more but still have a little bit more of that aggression in terms of power fishing, if you will. This is a great bait that kind of helps bridge that gap. So this is that Balletto Lele. So they make a lot of really, really good colors all across the color spectrum. Obviously pink, chartreuse, natural color patterns, but just a great bait. So these three are really efficient for fishing just below the surface, and that's equally as important as understanding the body profiles of certain plastics and what the fishability is and what nuances each of those presentations bring when you're targeting those big fish. Because let's face it, when you're really fishing those, that can be the difference between not getting bit and actually getting bit. And so hopefully those are really just some simple tips, something to consider in terms of putting in your arsenal and paying attention to when you're on the water, what the fish are telling you, right? In terms of their response to different presentations. And so just having and being in tune with all that can help you target more bites and better bites and more consistent bites as you fish from either one estuary to the next or from one trip to the next. So hopefully that'll help. Until next time, guys, leave a message, leave a comment, share the video if you can. Until next time, guys, tight lines, God bless. Take what you need and release the rest. God bless.